important. The first one is people. And what I do is when I see a deal, a chance to make an investment, before I even look at any of the numbers, who are the people? Are they honest? Do they have a good track record? Are they collegial? Can I work with them? And the same thing happens with the people that I hire, because turnover can kill a company. And so hire good people and keep them. When I took over the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, I remember we had to let about 20 people go. My receptionist couldn't speak 2 sentences without very bad grammar. And this is the first person that people want to talk to when they call Indiana. We couldn't keep her. I remember another one said, I interviewed everyone there. Another one said, my mother and the governor. I said, stop right there, you're fired. And we replaced those people with deal makers. And then I, having lowered my overall payroll by letting all those people go, I raised the salary of the ones that were there because they were woefully underpaid. That's one of the reasons we had low turnover. And I get this call from the budget guy, a guy named Chuck Shalio, a brilliant man. You can't do that. You can't do that. The governor just put in a order that we can't raise salaries. I said, Chuck, I did it. We don't have the money. Go find the money. The governor told me to run the IEDC like a business. And you can't run a business when you have turnover, and you're going to get turnover if you don't pay your people well. They found the money. So people is very, very important, and it's the first thing you ought to look at when you decide whether or not you're going to go forward on a deal. The second thing, and we were talking about this at lunch, I call barriers to entry. One day, did anybody play racquetball in the old days? There's courts here at the university. Oh, there's some few racquetball players. We played handball when I was there, but then racquetball came along, and I loved playing racquetball, but you couldn't get a court. So you had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Actually, I just made my wife do it, and she resented it, of course, but hon, you get up earlier than I do. Call the YMCA. You got to call right at 6 a.m., because if you call at 6:01, everybody else calling at 6 is reserved the courts. So I said, this is an opportunity. This is an entrepreneurial opportunity. I'm going to build a racquetball club. And by George, we did. We built racquetball clubs here and there, and all of a sudden I had the second biggest chain of racquetball clubs in the entire United States. I had them Buffalo, New York, and Hartford, Connecticut, and Houston, Texas, and I was running around, and I was making money at all of them. And then a funny thing happened. The tennis club, about a mile from my racquetball club in Buffalo, New York, went bankrupt, and somebody bought it and converted it to racquetball courts. In Houston, where I had the second club in town, all of a sudden there were 2 within a couple of miles. What was happening here? Well, it's easy to build a racquetball club. It's a little cube with some plaster in it. That's racquetball. And it had no barriers to entry. So my competitive edge easily got competed away. And my occupancy levels went way down, and I started losing money. And I started trying to sell these things as fast as I could, getting rid of them as fast as I could. And there's some interesting stories about that. But in fact, I had one in Terre Haute, and I found a buyer, and he didn't have a lot of money, so I had to guarantee his debt at the bank to give me the money to buy me out, and he defaulted on the debt. I was so busy getting rid of the racquetball clubs, I didn't have time to play racquetball. Okay, what do we learn here? Barriers to entry. From then on, I invested and always looked at what are the barriers to entry on this deal. And I invested in radio, where the license are issued by the United States government. And everybody who has a license, it's like a poker game around the table. And if you want to quit the poker game, there's somebody that wants behind you that wants a seat. So barriers to entry kept your prices up and your competition down. cable TV. In the old days, one cable TV per city. And so you got your cable TV franchise, barriers to entry. Banking. I had lunch with a banker here today, so I better be careful what I say. But highly regulated industry. Medical instruments, highly regulated, tough to crack, tough to get in. So I went from there to businesses with barriers to entry. Number 3 is mentorship. Find a mentor. I had a mentor. His name was Gene Glick, and he taught me a lot of things. But one of the things he taught me was his administration system, and I copied that, and I'm able now to do a lot of things that a lot of different things, and keep all the balls up in the air. And so I learned that from him. He also taught me that it's more difficult to intelligently give money away than it is to make it in the first place. And that's something I learned from him, and he's very true with that. And then I mentor others, and particularly now in the ex-offender area, where there's a huge glaring need for mentors who really care. Rely on your gut. That's something that you have to learn. We all have advisors. We have lawyers, and we have accountants, and we have mentors. But the decision has got to be yours. And how do you make that decision? Just because your lawyer, and I practiced for 20 years, just because your lawyer tells you something, it's not necessarily right. It's something you ought to listen to, take in consideration, but the decision as a business person has got to be yours. In order to do that, you got to rely on your gut. Now, I'm not saying you have to be conservative here, and I'm saying rely on your gut, not your ego, okay? But it's in here. Listen to yourself, and particularly if you're educated and you've got some seasoning, you deserve to be able to rely on your gut. Do so. Next, mind your manners. I was asked by one of my bosses to call somebody and to get some needed information to make a report. And I called the guy, and he wouldn't return my call. And I called him again, I was a young guy, and I called him 2 or 3 times. And meanwhile, my boss was asking me, where's that report? Where's that report? And I was frustrated, and because I couldn't get the report, the guy wouldn't call me back. My boss is talking to me about it, and I vowed that I would return all my calls for the rest of my life. Think about this. When it's all over, you're going to be remembered not so much by what you did, but how you did it. Now you ask yourself, well, why is this an essential principle of entrepreneurship that you didn't learn in school? Okay? I'll tell you why. Because in my book, a successful entrepreneur is not somebody that just makes money. It's somebody that does it with civility and class. And that's part of minding your manners.